So how did the agency, you talked a little bit about how the agency, or your wife talked about how the agency changed her perspective. It changed her. She grew up being very liberal, and very liberal family, very progressive family.
Right.
And the agency changed her to more center conservative.
So
I found that very, very fascinating.
Yeah, and at the risk of, I'm not going to speak for my wife, but what I will speak for is my experience and what I've seen in people like my wife. It's not that the agency changes the way that you view the world. It's that the agency exposes you to the real world. And once, especially folks, the farther left, the farther liberal, the farther progressive they are, like in their worldview, the more they're exposed to the real world outside of the United States, they're just faced with information that makes them ask very difficult questions about themselves, right? So, for example, one of the things that my wife used to just be really passionate about was refugee affairs. She was like, we need to take care of refugees. These people are coming from horrible places. They're relocating to the United States, and then we're not doing enough for them. Like, we don't give them education. We don't give them, effective cultural training to acculturate into the United States, or to assimilate into the United States. We need to do all this stuff for refugees.
This was her view prior to the CIA.
Correct, because she went to law school to do refugee law.
Okay.
And then she worked in a nonprofit relocating refugees. So she was very passionate about it, man. It was something that was so important to her that she had basically dedicated her core adult years to learning how to take care of refugees.
Was there an experience that she had that made her feel that strongly?
Partly was growing up as a third country child, because my wife was born in Venezuela.
Okay.
Grew up in Japan and then relocated to the United States.
Oh, wow.
And her parents are one Venezuelan, one American. Her family is split Venezuelan and American, and she survived. Like, she lived and watched her family go through all the Chavez years and all the demise of Venezuela from a first world city to a third world city.
Wow.
Or the city of Caracas in the country of Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my point is, once she actually started seeing the world, like once she didn't just see Venezuela, Japan, and the United States, once she started seeing what life is like in Africa, what life is like in Southeast Asia, what life is like in Latin America, true poverty, true corruption, true genuine abuses of human rights, right? Yeah. Actual slave labor. All of a sudden, her baseline for what is unacceptable shifted, and it shifted a lot. Right? What she used to think was, how are we going to bring in refugees and only give them $35,000 a year and only give them a crappy one-bedroom apartment for a family of 3? That's such an abuse. And then she goes out into the real world and she's like, oh my gosh, like there are families in China living in hutongs, which are just pieces of aluminum leaning up against the wall, and the only thing they use for fire is their own feces. And there's whole families, generations of families living together in these hutongs. And she's like, how is that acceptable? So all of a sudden, like, that perspective increased. And that's not just unique to her. That's unique to everybody at the agency. I was also fairly liberal going into the agency. Coming out of the agency, I was like, oh, what I need to protect, what makes America amazing, isn't all of our social welfare programs. What makes America amazing is our surplus of income and our capital, our ability to generate massive amounts of capital. Because just a small fraction of that massive amount of money is what can fund a social welfare program. Where in a foreign country, the whole country might be a social welfare program because they don't have enough wealth to just skim off a little bit. And because all of the money is going into social welfare, there's no money that goes into infrastructure, so nobody has clean water. There is no money that goes into the electrical power grid, so there's routine power outages, right? There's no money that goes into public health. There's no money that goes into whatever else. Here, by making sure that our core bull market succeeds, making sure that rich people have the capacity to make more money, bigger businesses, more jobs, right? More taxes, making sure they have that ability is what funds everything else. And the thing that made it possible for CIA to go out there and be the highest performing intelligence agency in the world is because it's got a shit ton of money. Why does it have so much money? Because we support this market. We support this world, this economy that just drives to encourage and incentivize people to be more than they have to be, right? If you want to be a doctor that makes $25,000 a year, you can go be a doctor in Mongolia, right? You can go be a doctor in friggin' most parts of Europe. You're not going to make a lot of money as a doctor.
Right.
You come here, you make a bunch of money, you become a doctor, you start making millions of dollars a year. That's great for us because the government's going to tax you for like 38% of your net worth. Sucks to be that guy, right? But you're still making 10 times what you'd be making if you were a doctor in France or if you were a doctor in Italy.
Right.
Right? So, like, that's what makes the market work. And the fact that you can incentivize those people by a few percentage points of taxes, right? I love that. I love the fact that we're making more doctors, more lawyers, and more billionaires than ever before. And that we're incentivizing people who are coming out of college to pursue those really difficult, it's not easy to build a business. It's not easy to become a doctor. We're incentivizing them for like 2 percentage points of taxes. Right? Like, oh, we'll decrease your taxes from 38% to 36%, and we won't tax capital gains. Like, to them, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars.
Right.
And all of that money just goes right into the United States tax base that allows us to have roads without potholes, an electrical grid that runs 24/7, 365 days a year, and clean water that literally comes out of our toilet if we chose to drink it, right?
Right.
That's insane. There's parts of the world, there's parts of the first world where you can't trust the water that comes out of a water fountain. Like, it's just, we have it so good here. You don't realize it until you start to travel and see the world through the eyes of a spy.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how she shifted. That's how many of us shift, because you start to see the real outside of America world, and you start to have a whole different sense of your left and right boundary. Inside the United States, our left and right boundaries are like this.
Right.
Once you get outside, you see, like, presidents who can just kill people at will, like what happened to when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia decided to just have a reporter killed in the UK. Like, boom, they can do that.